Welcome to the Action Shooting Show. Tonight we have Nick and John. So they can kind of fill themselves in, whatever they'd like to fill in about themselves. And we're going to do another after action report. This is a match that I didn't shoot, so I'm maybe asking some questions, and we'll just go from there. So yeah, Nick, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. My name is Nick. I've been doing run and gun for about 3 years now. No, 4 years. About 2018, I think. 2018 or 2019, don't recall right now. I've done well over 24 run and gun events right now, with the Gamut Challenge, the subject of today's episode being one of them. Although I would call it being run and gun a loose term. We'll get to that later. But anyway, I'm Nick. I've done quite a few of these, and excited to be here today with Ryan and John, who will be our next person here.
So guys, John here. I have been doing run and gun for quite some time, going back to March 2017. The infamous Rock Castle March 2017 match was the first East Coast match, which I found out about on the internet. Someone's like, "Hey, come run on a trail and shoot guns." I was like, "That sounds like fun." So I showed up. I've now done close to 40 of these matches, and I'm also the admin of the Run and Gun Discussion Facebook page, or Facebook group, which is really the central clearinghouse for all these types of matches nationwide. Not because I'm particularly special in any way, just the old guy who used to do it got off Facebook because he's smarter than we all are, and he asked me to take over the page, and I said yes. So those are sort of my creds, and both Nick and I and Ryan as well. We've not only done a ton of these matches, but also RO'd and staffed and helped organize a large number of these matches too. So we got a pretty good basis for comparison and knowledge about the sport, and we're going to tell you about a match that we shot today called the Gamut Challenge, which is in the same vein, but definitely a very different animal with a very different structure.
Yeah, awesome. So that's good. And if you don't know me, watch other episodes of this. I'm on all of them. As I said, we're doing the Gamut Challenge, and this isn't your traditional run and gun the same way as like Heartbreak was the last episode. So I guess does one of you guys want to tell me I kind of using the thing match flavor, like what's the idea of this match, or what's kind of the match flavor of it?
Okay, I'll start here with a little bit. The match is called a Gamut Challenge. It's the first of its kind, held by a fella named by Bob Keller. He is a legend in the special operations community. Delta guy, Green Beret, retired, all this stuff. So he started a company called what was the company called, John? I'm sorry.
Gamut Resolutions.
Thank you. Gamut Resolutions. It's based out of Central Florida. Think between Tampa and Orlando area, like Lakeland-ish. He runs that company out there, and they have a facility in the area called Rangeworks where he's an owner at, and it is effectively a match where he said he treated it like selection in terms of it was a plenty of unknowns where competitors we had a vague description of the match where folks would be told like, hey, we are expecting a 2-day match with north of 20 miles.
We were told to expect about 20 miles of rucking with a minimum 35-pound dry pack weight. We were given a round count, a basic gear list, and that was pretty much it. We just said, oh, and he didn't address it publicly, but if you looked around or sent him a message, we found out that the max engagement distance was around a little over 100 yards. But pretty much beyond that, all we knew is it was going to be X miles. We're going to ruck a lot. We're going to shoot a lot, and it's going to be hard. And it did not disappoint in any of those regards. He was 100% honest in his very limited match briefing.
And the flavor of the match here was, with how vague it was, like generally with run and gun, there is like a varying spectrum of transparency with the matches in terms of we'll have on one end of the spectrum, stages are given out in advance, piecemeal at a time. And on the other end, you would have just hey, this is the state, this is the event, this is the venue. If you've been to this venue before, you may have an idea as to what the facility might look like. This was definitely a little bit to further down that latter end where it was vague, and you would ask like leading questions on an individual level, and you might get some nuggets of information like John alluded to with like the engagement distance, but otherwise it was very different. And the way that we approached the match, we were thinking it was going to be like a run and gun. It was going to be like a normal, say, competition. It wasn't. Bob, he I don't want to presume competition experience, but he definitely didn't run it like any sort of competition like it was before, and that played to the benefit for the event in terms of keeping us on our toes and having us do things that were simply not expected. So we can go into a little bit more detail about what that looked like later on here when we talk about the conduct of the match.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the match flavor and match format. Typical run and gun, you'll have a start line, you'll run through the forest or through whatever terrain you get, depending on where it is in the country. And every, let's say, half mile to mile and a half, they'll stop, you'll shoot a stage, and then you'll take off running again, and until you effectively get back to the start finish line. That's kind of what Nick and I were expecting. And leading up to the match, we spent a bunch of time chatting in the evenings about looking at sat imagery of the range, trying to figure out what we were in for. Should we pack? How do we pack appropriately, or plan appropriately, or stage ammo appropriately? And suffice to say, we were completely wrong. We sort of estimated that looking at the range, it's a very, I'm going to call it a CQB oriented range. It's about 17 bays, most of which are less than 50 yards, and only one is over about 100 and change. And it's also surrounded by a bunch of lakes and water features. And so what we guessed is that you would basically shoot a stage and then lap the property. Shoot a stage, lap the property. And there's so much water, we were certain we were getting sent in the drink. We packed dry bags, we packed all sorts of crap. Turns out that wasn't the case at all. And I'm going to talk a bit about the match. I don't want to give too many details because I think Bob tries to keep it sparse on purpose, and he's planning on doing another one later this year in November. So we're not going to give away certainly all the secrets at all, but we'll talk about the match. And at this one, at least, we didn't get wet. But what was interesting is instead of using the small property, because it's only a couple acres, he basically got permission from neighboring landowners for us to ruck out on their property. We didn't shoot on the property, but we rucked. And effectively how it worked, it wasn't too dissimilar in terms of what your body experiences, in that we'd go a predetermined ruck. You'd head out to the end of some like orange orchard or something, go do 5 miles or more, which then looped you back to the range complex. And then you'd have some sort of physical challenge, some sort of mental challenge, or some sort of shooting challenge. Obviously, because all the bays were clustered in that central area, you'd go ruck for a bit, come back and shoot, and then maybe do some sort of mental challenge or physical challenge or agility challenge, or the obstacle course, which they have on site. And by the way, I know the BGSL and Heartbreak folks aren't going to like this, but the O course at Rangeworks is a lot harder, a lot more physical, and a lot more dangerous.
Let's not allude to the existence of BGSL's line of tires, because I imagine Bob would have an absolute field day with the simplicity and the soul extraction those things can bring.
Yeah. So, except it wouldn't be 6 tires; it'd be 30.
Yes,
it'd be 30. Bob is cruel in a good way.
I would add on to this that the conduct of the match was, you as a competitor, you did not know what the next event would be, so there was a lot of unknowns going into it. You knew that there would be, say, maybe 6 or 8 stages based off your ammo, for example. We'll get to that in a little bit later, but you only knew what the event you were currently doing was, how to get there, and what to do to get to that location that you would be like your turnaround point, or what to look for. So there were, in some cases, there were cache items. In some cases, you were told, hey, drop your pack, drop your gear, go out this gate, make a right. You'll find a truck. That is your turnaround point. You weren't told a distance. You weren't told whatever. You were just told, get there, and that's what your step was. You didn't know what was going on afterwards. So there was a lot of questioning as to pacing, as to, okay, drop on my gear. Now what? Now, what am I in for? So there was quite a bit of mental exercise going on there, with just the unknown being there and pacing yourself accordingly. So that was a real interesting aspect of this that I have not seen before in a run and gun or similar type of event that me that me or perhaps John have done before.
Yeah. One thing I will note is that for to be honest, Nick and I were kind of expecting a bit of a shit show, being that it was the first time that that they'd run this event, because we've all been to plenty of matches where it was the first time for the match director. And to Bob's credit and Bob's staff, it really ran extremely well. Things started on time, ended on time. There wasn't anything too half-baked in terms of, something that the match director dreamed up that actually didn't work in real life. There really wasn't a whole lot of that. Like, pretty much everything was thoroughly tested and vetted. And I was very impressed with how the match ran, the match flow, and everything else. So that's certainly worth repeating, and a credit to Bob for putting that together, especially his first time organizing something like this, at least publicly. Who knows what he did with his time in the Army? They might have been doing these weekly in Delta, but I don't know shit about that life. So who knows?
Well, that's neat, and it kind of gives me like shades of like what Wolverine does, and maybe even like the sniper action challenge they have out west, where there's a lot of that. The unknowns, I like the idea of not being able to pace yourself. I think with running guns, we know they'll say that's a 5K race, it's a 10K, and you kind of know, with a few exceptions where they spring things on you, like at the end, you kind of know, like, if I push, this is the end of what I got to do today.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously it's not the case there. And like with Wolverine, the feeling that I get with the match director, and he has some kind of special forces background. I think he was a sniper in some group in the Army. I can't remember, but he's very much about not gaming. Like, they set up the match and the rules in a way that, while it's still a competition and there's winners and maybe there's prizes, he doesn't want it to be a 3-gun or a USPSA where, like, people are gearing what they do to this specific event. He kind of wants you to show up and run the gear that you got. I mean, obviously I would imagine the Army, any of these military groups, they're changing their loadout for a mission, but they're not like tailoring it so specific that, it's like I said, like a USPSA open gun is good for USPSA open. And that's, that's kind of it. Whereas a match like this, it sounds like they want you to bring gear that's just that can do all kinds of things, because you don't know what it's going to be, right?
Yep. And I actually laid out some of my gear. I don't know if you guys want to talk about gear at some point, but I brought a couple of things that I took to the match that I thought were, useful or not useful or whatever, that I can talk about as well.
Yeah, I think
let's do. Let's
going into the gear and our considerations we had, especially with the vagueness of the match and what we did to kind of our research and what kind of gear we brought to address these things that we expected to be the case.
I'd like to do that. Is there, just to get it through, was there any divisions in this, or is it just strictly run what you brung? Awesome.
Within that, it was strictly a gear list that he emailed out. The main takeaways from it, outside of slung rifle, you needed a means of carrying 6 rifle magazines on you, a 35 pound dry ruck, 32 ounces of water was one of the items specifically mentioned, and then recommended items such as sunscreen, whatever. Extra pair of boots, extra socks, all that, kind of standardized, like relatively, what you expect from like a military packing list, if you would,
right.
Before movement.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
John, do you have anything else to add to that? Because I can definitely talk a bit about what my interpretation of a standardized list looked like when we talked about our gear and whatnot.
Yeah. I think there's one thing we should talk about before we get into gear, which is the scoring format, because the scoring format wasn't disclosed at all. And I'm not going to disclose the, out of respect to Bob and what he's trying to put, because I enjoyed the fact that we knew so little. But what I will talk about is in run and gun, it's very straightforward. It's basically time plus. You shoot the stage. If you have any remaining targets, you get additional time put on as a penalty. And then the matches, your overall match score is a combination of your run time versus your shoot time. Obviously, the faster your shooting time and the faster your run time, the more points you earn, and then that's how the final standings are calculated. Gamut was a little bit different in that there was simply overall time, right? From the moment you stepped off the finish line at, whatever your start time was between 8 a.m. and about 9:30, 10 a.m. Until the moment you stepped across the finish line at the end of the day. And then the shooting, instead of being assigned points, was simply assigned penalties for misses. Some stages had par times where you had to execute in advance. You had to, neutralize all the targets by the end of the par time. And any targets left unneutralized when par expired, you ate a penalty for. And then there were other stages that were not timed, that were simply on your overall run time, but with extremely steep penalties. And the shooting was very, very simple. Like, shooting a 3-inch paper dot at 10 yards for pistol and 25 yards for rifle, right? Not very hard to shoot that at all. But every single miss off that 3-inch dot was like a 15-minute penalty on your runtime. And Nick can talk about accruing lots and lots of penalty time for a lot of different things. And what Bob said at the brief in the beginning of the day was that he said, you've got to be good at it all to win this match. You cannot be a fast rucker or a fast runner and not be able to shoot and expect to win. You can't show up as a USPSA GM, one of the best shooters in the country. And if you can't ruck and you can't run, don't expect to win either. And that ultimately wound up being the case, because there were some people who accrued literally hours of penalty time. And and the top guy who the winner of the match, who was blazingly fast on the rucking, blazingly fast on the running, and a great shooter, still accrued about an hour of penalty time. So it's basically impossible to have a 0 penalty match, just the way it's set up. There's just too much going on. You're too tired. You're 20 miles in. You've been carrying stupid amounts of weight, and that's how it works. So you effectively had your raw run time, your penalty time. There was some bonus time you could also earn for little challenges here and there, and then any delay time or wait time, exactly like run and gun, where if you arrive at a stage and you can't proceed because someone else is actively shooting, you would earn that time back. And then you had a total elapsed time, which is how the rankings were determined. And it was all netted out over 2 total days, because we had full day Saturday and full day Sunday of the match, and that's how it worked. But I think that's sort of helpful to frame what we carried, why we carried, and how we did it.
And adding on to the shooting portion of that, where again the shooting, I don't want to say wasn't difficult. For a seasoned run and gunner, I would say that certainly 100% absolutely doable. Again, penalties were steep, and if there was a time, a part time, it was very tight. You had to move fast. If you were not able, if you had a malfunction, if you had anything go wrong that affected your shooting, that part time would sneak up on you and destroy you. So part times were tight. Your shooting wasn't, I don't want to say difficult, but penalties were very steep. So again, much more different than what we're used to from a run and gun, USPSA, other competitive shooting perspective.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Well,
So
isn't that kind of the thing with run and gun in general? Like, I've had way harder shots in like a 3-gun match than maybe almost any run and gun. But once you get that heart rate going, you're, like you said, you're 20 miles into your day, and like even like John was talking about that, a 10-yard pistol shot on 3-inch target, like just about any of us could go out cold right now and shoot that and probably not drop heart much, if anything, out of that target. But you get into a ruck and it starts going downhill real quick. So
an additional caveat to that is, I know even when I practice things like that, like holdovers and different things like that with like a relatively high standard of accuracy being demanded, I don't often do that for many rounds. I don't do that for 30 repetitions in a single sitting. I don't do that for 15 repetitions in a single sitting. So that right there is also an endurance factor to consider with that surface level simple shooting that you get with engaging, say, a 3-inch dot at X and Y distance with X and Y rifle and pistol. Generally, you're not doing that for a very long time. And that's not a ding on the course of fire at all. It's just a different thing that seems easy on paper. But again, with the added variables of fatigue and hitting 13 miles in a single day, and it's exhausting to sit and do that for that long with that many rounds in general. So those things that were easy ended up not being easy when it came to game day.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
just, shooting my lightweight 11.5-inch AR, shooting 30 rounds with this tight, with these, extremely demanding accuracy requirements, or no, not demanding accuracy requirements, but extremely steep penalties for failure to maintain the minimum level of accuracy. Like I would have to stop and just like let the rifle sling and, hang around my neck for like 15 seconds just because we just, rocked a whole bunch, done a PT, carried heavy shit, and then came through a brutal O course and then expected to shoot. And like, I only had, 5 or 7 shots to me at a time before I had to take a break to avoid dropping shots on something that, like you said, would be literally trivial if you were just, walked out and just shooting at, a casual flat range. So yeah, it gets so much harder when you're in that depths of exhaustion. Yeah.
I think within the gear thing is what we can talk about too is like different things that I know I changed some of my gear going into this that were totally unique for Gamut Challenge. I can talk a bit about that. John, if you want to start off with a little bit about considerations that you made for Gamut Challenge for like say your rifle that that were unique to Gamut Challenge. What sort of things did you do in that regard?
So I shot an 11.5-inch AR pistol, unloaded. And the big thing that I did, obviously there was a sling, but other than that, it's pretty much exactly as you see it here. I did put on some offset irons, and I can talk about that in a bit. And I went with just a standard T2 optic on top. The T2 optic was a big departure for me because I have been shooting LPVOs since the start. This is the first match I've ever taken a red dot to. And in some ways I'm glad, in some ways I'm not glad. The match in terms of range was certainly red dot appropriate. Nothing was over 120 yards, and even for all but about 2 shots in the entire match, and I'm going to leave that intentionally vague, for all about 2 shots in the match, I think the red dot was perfect. Those 2 shots did prove a challenge for me, and I probably would have been better off if I did have an LPVO on, but I just went with this, and I just had the offset irons simply as a backup. The reason my front iron is set back slightly from the front is I did want room for a WML. Nick and I, looking at the distance and the number of competitors and the fact that it was a brand new match, we're pretty much certain that just by virtue of match flow, we were going to be shooting at close to twilight just because it was in February, the days are short. And so I wanted to leave room for a WML, which I've since removed from the rifle. Ultimately, there was nobody shooting anywhere close to dark. We were certainly still rucking close to dark, but WMLs were not necessary at all. And I didn't wind up needing the WML. I didn't wind up needing the offset irons either because my T2, thank you, aim point, did not break. Aside from that, it's pretty straightforward. Geisley SDE trigger, my general favorite trigger. This is a LMT Mars lower and a Knights 11.5 CQB upper because I got that Gucci drip sand cutter carrier as well. But aside from that, pretty straightforward. It performed flawlessly. I've got several thousand rounds through it. It's getting pretty beat up, pretty scraped up. It's been to a lot of matches, and I'm a big fan. But aside from that, that was the rifle that I carried. I think if I were to go back, I probably would take an LPVO on it just because I'm more used to it. And I don't think it would have hindered me at all. There's a small weight penalty, of course, but we were thinking with the distance and just the other extreme weight, anywhere I could save even a couple grams was probably worth it. And that was what led me to go with the T2. But I think ultimately, just because I have so much more experience shooting LPVOs, I would have been better off if I'd stuck with an LPVO and ate the probably about a 15 or 16 ounce penalty if I put like a Loophole VX6 1-6 on, which is a 14 ounce with a 5 ounce scope mount. So that would have been, those are my comments on the rifle choice. Nick?
So can I say I'm excited to hear what Nick broke this match, because I just assume that something broke because he's a Marine and that's what their specialty, one of their many specialties.
I wouldn't call myself special. I would barely call myself a Marine. Anyway, that beside the point. For this match, I ran specifically some unique stuff for it. Nothing unique in like the normal shenanigans of running a 203 or running some obscenely obscure BS thing. In this case, I kind of ran something I thought would be optimal and fitting for this match with what I had at my disposal. In that case, I ran a 14-5 Knights Armament Mod 2 upper with a Mars L lower. Thank you to Privateer Group for supporting this match, by the way. We'll get to that later. With the engagement range that we saw, and with expectations that I would be shooting like kind of fast and stuff like that, like CQB kind of ranges, I elected to take off my LPVO that's traditionally on this, and I threw on a T2 with a like a night skyscraper mount, so like a 2.3, like a high mount. It's for like a night vision gun, but I took it off and like, hey, let me go ahead and run it with this. I even ran it to the point of asking a friend to borrow a magnifier, which, if you know anything about me, I am wholeheartedly not a fan of magnifiers. After trying a slew of them, not getting on board with them, I bit the bullet and kept it with me. And even at one point in the match, I elected to use it, regretted it, and didn't elect to do it. So in this case, I would say, opposing John's own personal recommendation for himself, I was pleased with my choice of a red dot for this match. Doing this match again, I would likely do it again. Maybe perhaps not with a longer gun like this, but again, that's just a consequence of what I had immediately available to me for this match. And with that, very happy with what I selected. Again, I would probably go shorter for me personally, but the weight difference and whatnot, I was pretty satisfied with the performance. I didn't feel like my guns were not meeting it. It was more of like just the me factor, the Indian, not the arrow kind of thing, being playing a factor here.
Yep. So
all right. Yeah, I guess pistol next, and then after that we can go into any of the other gear, that specialty gear you guys may have brought.
I don't have too many comments on the pistol. It's the same pistol I've been running for pretty much everything. The one thing I will talk about, though, pistol is just a P320. It's got a Parker Mountain machine barrel and comp. It's got my faithful Acro P1 on top, thousands of rounds. It's still locked up. I didn't dig it out. But what I will talk about is how I carried it. And I've been doing a lot of running for the past couple of years, and I've got some sciatica issues and some hip issues. And it's gotten to the point that I can't really run very effectively with any sort of battle belt on, whether it's like a padded HSGI style belt, which I've tried, or the minimalist belts with Raptor Tactical, or like a Ronin Senshi, any kind of the micro Molly belts. I've tried many of them, and they've just exacerbated my hip issues. And what I did is I had Darren Talbot over at EGL. I commissioned a custom chest rig, which I've been using now for several matches. It's been extremely successful, and it just carries 3 either AR 7.62 or 5.56 mags back here, 3 STAC Kiwi slots for the pistol, a GP pouch on the front, and what Darren and I worked out and designed, of course, is a Kydex holster Velcroed in. So I now have a chest-mounted pistol for all my matches, and I don't carry any belt whatsoever. The only difference being I might put a like a lightweight fabric belt on, just like a basic nylon belt with a single pistol mag carrier for basically an emergency or a speed reload. But I pretty much now carry everything on my chest. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this for everyone. I also wouldn't necessarily recommend it for every weapon platform. If you're a 2011 user or anything that has runs cocked and locked in single action, I don't know that I would be comfortable running that on my chest, basically pointed right at my sternum for a running gun match, especially with lots of low crawling and obstacles and everything else. It's a judgment call, because if something goes wrong, you legitimately could die. But it's a choice that I've made with what I consider to be very solid pistol management fundamentals, holstering, unholstering on the draw. And now I carry a chest-mounted pistol for every match. And I've been doing this since I had this rig commissioned, and I'm a big fan. And aside from that, the pistol was just, like I said, that P320. We carried 6 pistol mags, so I had 3 on the chest and 3 in my backpack. You did have opportunity to swap them out throughout the day as necessary, so you were always, if you can carry 4 on your person, I would say is a good number for Gamut, and then just have the rest in your pack, because you did need to have all your ammo with you at all times throughout the day, but the shooting obviously was staggered. around. And one other comment I will make, I don't think this will be spoiling anything, is that all your pistol mags need to be loaded to 15 rounds, not more, not less. With your rifle mags, 30 rounds, not more, not less. So if you downloaded a mag just for more reliable seating, you were going to pay a very steep penalty. So all I can say is make sure you can load, make sure you've got a rifle and mag combo that will allow you to seat 30 round mags with a closed bolt. Because if you don't, you've got a deficient weapon system. And don't try, there's no gaming it from that perspective. And it was interesting to see Bob run it that way. We weren't expecting it, but it did mean that literally everybody was starting with the exact same baseline. And if you had like a 40 round big stick or a D60, you were at no advantage. And in fact, you were scrambling at the start line when you found out to unload or unload, reload, whatever. And I was doing the same. And I got to the start line, moments before I was due to step off. I was still trying to stretch and like take my feet up for blister prevention and all that, because what got thrown out as a surprise. So I will certainly throw that bone out to anybody who takes the time to listen to this. 30 rounds in your rifle mags, 15 rounds in your pistol mags. At least that's how it worked the first time. Bob may change it up. Who knows? But that's what I got.
I love the idea of someone carrying around a D60 with just 30 rounds on it, because that's
on that.
What's that?
Speaking from experience on that, my D60 was loaded with 60. Spent the egregious amount of time to load it, and when I saw it at the start line, I was like, "Cool, this D60 is now permanently a ballast for me." So I remember coming back from, I think I was like a little bit ahead of John, like 1 or 2 people ahead from John, and I came back to the start line and I told John like, "Hey, load your stuff to 30, dude." Because I paid for that a bit and I learned my lesson. So again, throwing that bone out there for you folks that are tuning in and staying on board, listening to us ramble on about this. Load of 30, load of 15. Again, as a match may dictate. And some quick things about other gear considerations on me. I ran a very standard, like my P10 with a P1 Acro X300. I've been using probably this gun for 3 years now. I just replaced a whole new frame and all this stuff because I put a stupid amount of rounds through it at this point. So I just had a new frame just in time for a match with the old slide, and it worked fine. I didn't have my standard. Actually, I did. I had some problems with my infamous reloads because I'm just I'm not very good. I'm very much an enthusiast, not an expert. So I had some problems, self-induced problems with that. But other than that, the gear that I brought that I expected to run fine, ran fine. I was a little bit more traditional in the gear that I carried when compared to John. I ran my normal run and gun competition, whatever belt. So, standard AWS inner outer Velcro belt with a Safariland holster, my P10, 2 rifle, 2 pistol mags, a fanny pack with some stuff in it, and then a Go Ruck pack with a Velocity Systems test rig that I carried 3 40-round mags with. And considering I didn't need to carry any land nav gear or any other crazy admin gear, I just had a slick 3-pouch deal. So on the Velocity Systems, you can go kind of wide. So given I didn't need to carry any other crazy gear, just ammo and maybe some substance stuff, I just had these filled, the front pouches filled with just pistol, along with the 2 of each magazines on my belt, and that was totally fine. In regards to the pack, I was very pleased with the pack, especially given the distance. I just ran a standard Go Ruck 26-liter GR1, no hip belt, and I had some concessions going in, not using a hip belt for support. And thankfully, it wasn't as bad as I was expecting. My lats were still hurting, but I was glad with my decision to not have a hip belt, because you were donning your gear off and on pretty often, and to mess around with the belt with your pistol on and all this stuff was just not something I was willing to work with, and I'm glad that I made that choice going forward. So yeah, that's kind of the gear considerations I made going into Gamut, and generally with the gear outside of some self-induced reloading ammunition crisis stuff, I was pretty satisfied with.
Yeah.
Hey, John, real quick, your chest holstered, is there any kind of active retention on that? Or is that just like, it's just a real snug, clicky fit and it's good from there?
It's a snug, clicky fit, just a cheap Kydex holster. Literally got it from Amazon for a chest holster. I didn't think I needed to spend a whole lot of time, effort, or money in getting something like I carry with a Filster holster or other high-end holsters, but for the chest, I just needed something that would retain it. And then I have a Velcro flap that actually goes and closes over. I do it like this, closes over the entire pistol, so it's actively retained. And then I've got clicky. I can got a little pull tab on it. I can rip it off and draw a pistol with still a little bit of clicky retention when it comes time. So at no point have I found that that's cost me any real amount of points or any concern. And it's been working out. It's been working out great. It is a slower draw than drawn from a conventional holster on a belt, but not terribly slow. So I'm willing to make that trade-off, especially because like I mentioned, it was really driven by the aforementioned hip issues that I've been dealing with. And certainly I don't think it gives any real performance advantage. It's just, something I got to work with because I got bad hips. So yeah, that worked great. The one thing I will note though, is because I had everything on my chest, I was able to use a pack with a hip belt. And if you think about the load, right, 35-pound dry pack weight with 6 loaded mags of rifle, 6 loaded mags of pistol, which are about a pound each. That's 12 pounds of ammo. Your rifle, your water, your food, and anything else you're carrying, any other sundries. So when we stepped off the start line at the beginning of the day, we had close to 60 pounds on, about 58, 57 pounds, all things considered. And for those who were trying to be competitive and come in with a top time, I jogged a lot. Like I ran most of day one with all that weight. I was probably averaging about 16-minute miles for, I think the first day we did something like 15 miles of movement. And my Garmin watch told me that I was averaging at about a 16-minute pace overall for the full day for my moving time. And I certainly paid for that because day 2, my legs were smoked. And it just got even harder and even heavier with additional things, additional PT. So I was glad to have the hip belt. I carried a GoRuck pack for the first day, a GoRuck Rucker 3.0 with a weight plate. And I was actually really pleased with that choice for the first day because it's a very small, very slim, low profile pack. And I was able to, jog most of the time. Whereas if I had like a big proper backpacking pack, which certainly would have been more comfortable, but it also would have been a lot more cumbersome. And so that would have been, I don't think I could have maintained the pace that I did with a much bigger, more bulky pack, especially with some of the, tight weaving and navigations in the orchards with the trees and various other things we had to do as part of the match. So I was glad with that. But I was pretty beat up by it the second day. And so I actually switched to a Mystery Ranch 3-day assault pack. And that has a proper hip belt with live wings, and it definitely carries a lot more comfortably. And I was also glad the second day that I had the second pack, and it was just a factor of how I packed for the flight down to Florida that I actually had both of these packs handy. And it took a little bit of jerry rigging to find how to securely stash my steel weight plate inside my Mystery Ranch in a way that didn't like tear it apart and didn't like just bounce all over, but took a lot of zip ties and padding. And I actually ran to Lowe's the morning of with Nick, and we were scrambling to try and make it on time. And I was looking for like pool noodles at Walmart, and I wound up finding some pipe insulation at the hardware in the plumbing section at Lowe's. And I used the split foam pipe insulation to kind of put layers all around the steel weight plate to stash it inside the hydration slot of the Mystery Ranch 3DAP. So it worked okay. It wasn't great, but ultimately it was a lot more comfortable. And during the second day, we did actually have to carry some additional weight. We got some, I'll call them penalty items to carry. And I was glad I had the 3DAP because it had A, more volume, and B, much better load carriage than a GoRuck pack. So I was certainly glad that I had that for the second day.
Awesome. Yeah, and I mean, if anyone, if you haven't rucked in this, that you're watching this, how and where you carry weight makes a big difference on what kind of what kind of speed you can go over the terrain. And so I'm sure that getting that squared away really was key.
Yeah, it made a difference, and I'm pretty happy with overall gear selection. I'm pretty happy with everything I had. Everything worked pretty well. Nothing broke. I went in standard trail running sneakers. I think Nick did pretty much the same. There were some guys there with boots but for the most part, everybody in boots was going slower than we were. Boots give you certainly more stability. I think ankle support's a bit of a myth, to be honest, but it does give you better stability with the high boots. I do agree with that. The stiffer sole, and but I just went with the standard trail runners. I almost wore shorts, but we were astonishingly lucky in that it was Florida, but it was like cool 60 degrees. It almost got chilly at one point the first day, which was actually really great. It could have been a heck of a lot hotter and a lot more miserable. And so we really lucked out with the weather in terms of, Central Florida could have been a nightmare, but it was really nice. Nick's from Florida, so so he can comment on that. Just like pants. I almost wanted to wear shorts, but I'm glad I had pants. A t-shirt, like just a moisture wicking t-shirt, and then a baseball cap, and then my standard, shooting glasses and, just earplugs, in earplugs. I wouldn't recommend over the ears. They're just heavy, bulky. They bounce around. They get super hot. There were guys who had them, but they were like, I could see the sweat streaming down from inside your ears, and that's kind of gross. So that's what I had, and pretty happy with everything.
All right. Is there anything else specific gear wise before we move on? You guys want to mention?
No, I'd say definitely have your gear squared away before going on. Not bashing John, because I know you made it audible, especially with the gear you had on hand. And like, hey, I have the capability to address something that I saw in the first day. Let me go ahead and like make the change to the not the crab legs. I'm sorry, the hip belt. So, not a bash on you. That it's seriously not. Have your gear like really squared away and understand, like, approach this with absolute confidence, and you're going to find a confidence in doing things beforehand.
Yeah.
So again, having your gear squared away because you don't want that working against you on game day, or game days rather. So I think gear wise, I think we're doing pretty well on that.
Yeah, and let me add, especially if you're newer and you're watching this, like these guys are talking about kind of adjusting gear before this match, and they didn't really give a timetable. Generally, you want to get good gear, you want to get it squared away, and you just want to shoot that. I see a lot of people, especially newer shooters, that are like adding stuff or changing gear like right up to before a match. Like when you've been doing this a long time and you know how everything works and you're like used to it, and you can get away with that. But I see a lot of people show up with like gear that they throw a trigger in the night before the match, or they like throw a new red dot on and they show up and it's like it's not zeroed, or it's not zeroed well, or the trigger's doubling or not resetting, or like whatever. If you know your stuff, you can get away with that. If you're kind of new, I would recommend not doing that. John even said he's running a red dot in this. He doesn't run it a lot. It worked well for him, but then he still kind of, there's a balance there. So
exactly.
don't go adding gear.
You inherently take a big risk doing this.
Yes.
All of us have had experiences like this, given our time shooting, and inherently there's a risk to that. Sometimes they'll pay off, other times it may not. And again, you just have to understand that, like, if you're willing to pay the capital to make your way down here, do all this up forward, but then not have those different things you're supposed to have working with you, work against you. You just have to go ahead and accept that risk if you're going to go ahead and go down that route. I would generally say, and I think all of us would agree here, nah. If you can help it, have your stuff squared away before you make your way down and you travel. Investment going down there in the first place.
Yeah.
Don't embarrass yourself and waste your time and money doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I had a new Geisley SDE for my Heartbreak gun like 3 days before the match, and it's like it's a Geisley. That gun has run every trigger it's ever had in it 100%. There was like zero reason not to put it in there, and I made myself not put it in there before the match because as soon as I did, it was going to malfunction the whole time. Since then, I've put it in and it's run, not surprisingly, 100%. But as much as it was a better trigger, I'm smart enough at this point to know that like the trigger was not going to change my outcome of that match if it worked, and if it didn't work, it was absolutely going to affect it. So.
And ironically, on the trigger note, Nick, if you recall, our good friend, we went down with the three of us. He had his fancy new Glock with his fancy new Timney Alpha Glock trigger that, it's an amazing trigger tune, right? Gets almost a, 2011 sear engagement, sub 2 pound trigger. And sure enough, he brought it. Sure enough, it got muddy and wet. And sure enough, his pistol went single shot and cost him huge amounts of time and penalties because he dropped it in not too long before the match. So the lesson
Right.
there is, I would say if you can't have 3 guaranteed range trips prior to a big match that you're spending money traveling to, match registration. For this match, we had to ship ammo down because the round counts were high. I probably spent close to about $1,000 to go shoot Gamut, I would say, all things considered, between my flight, my ammo, shipping ammo, match fees, hotel fees, car rental fees. It all adds up. And, we do it because we love the sport, and it's a great time. You get to hang out with friends. But it really sucks when you drop all that cash, go there, and then your equipment lets you down because you couldn't resist the urge to not dick around 2 nights before the match. So if you don't have multiple range trips on the schedule between changing something, anything, and match day, I would say just wait, because there is almost no piece of gear you can add to your repertoire that's really going to make a huge, meaningful difference in your match performance. It just
I guess
doesn't.
it's one brand new Gucci part. It's gonna excel my performance so much more. Nah, dude. Listen,
I put
listen
No.
to John. Listen to
bro,
Ryan.
it's gonna be sick, bro. Bro, believe me, bro.
Bro, but we've all, and we're saying this because every one of us here has probably done it more than once, and I can't think of a time it hasn't bit me for doing it. So
It never goes well. It never goes
yeah.
well.
So moving on, we normally would do like walk through stages. I don't know that we want to go through like every single stage. Is there anything you want to talk about with any, like a specific stage, or?
If I could suggest, instead of doing that, me and John can talk a little bit. Johnny Tyne and talked a little bit about it, but like your performance on the rucking portion there, and
Sounds good.
anyone even looking at Google Maps can understand and look at, say, okay, hey, here's what the elevation looks like. Dog, we're in like Central Florida.
There's no elevation.
Like there's not much elevation to go there. However, a significant caveat that I will add to that is that there is one portion that I'm gonna feel like an idiot saying this. One of the most difficult hills I experienced was in Florida. It was in Central Florida at Gamut Challenge, and I was telling some friends about this. Like, dude, here, check out my Garmin, and I looked at my elevation change. It was like 47 feet of elevation change. Like, I felt like a total idiot saying this. With all the run and guns and different things we do, with the outdoor experience you have otherwise, I sound dumb, but I think I'm like becoming a dirt connoisseur or like a dirt snob. Because if you've had any time in Florida, there's like this. I can say this for like North Carolina, for South Carolina, for Georgia, for whatever. There's like a very unique Florida sand or dirt that's just there, and it's just very loose. No amount of driving over, no amount of weighted vehicles driving along it is going to compact it anymore to make a compact surface for you to run on. There's just this very loose dirt I've only ever seen in Florida and maybe southern Georgia, and this place was covered in it.
Yeah.
So there was this one very gradual hill, on paper looks like nothing, on Google Maps, nothing, but you're trudging up that, man, and it's just sucking your soul out. It's pulling you down, it's going every step, and that contributed to being like Rock Castle power line level of exertion for me. I don't know if John can confirm or deny that, but that's what it felt like for me, at least within that specific stretch.
I mean, I live in the mountains. My house is at 8,000 feet elevation, and there are 2,000 foot mountains. I can see them from my window right over there. And this was just as misery inducing. And it's just the soft sand, because every step you take, just, you're going up, but you're sliding back. It just sucks the energy out from your stride. You can't get like a good pace going. You can't keep momentum going, which I think is the hardest part. So if I would say, from the physical portion of preparation for Gamut, the single best thing you can do is ruck heavy and ruck, back-to-back days, because that's what's going to suck you dry. The shooting wasn't particularly challenging in any way. If you can shoot like B8s at 25 yards with a pistol and shoot rifle B8s at 50 yards, that's literally everything you'll need to do. There was some strong hand, weak hand for sure. There was some shooting from a moving vehicle, which was really cool. We don't get a chance to do that very often. That was actually, and the way they set it up, I will say, was awesome. The way they had it, the course of fire, the targets. Bob did a great job. He had ROs driving you around in some like old some like old hoopty Buick, which by the way had working air conditioning. This thing was like a 1988 Buick.
This was the most pristine range vehicle I've ever seen in my life. I thought they, like, with the car crisis going on, I'm like, where'd you guys track this thing down? This thing's a gem. I don't know why it's secluded to range work. This should be like
grandma.
his first car.
Yeah, it's a great daily. Honestly, it's probably like, I know Bob's got some kids in high school. It's probably like he borrowed his like daughter's car.
Exactly.
But that was the range car, so that was cool. But yeah, so the shooting, if you just practice like literally fundamentals, and I don't know, right? I've never been in the military, certainly not in Delta Force, but I've got, I know Bob loosely. I know a couple other guys who actually left Delta, and I've had a chance to chat with them at length over beers or days on the range. And they say, most of what we drill is just fundamentals. We drill ready ups. We drill, super, super tight accuracy standards, because in their role as a premier hostage rescue team, 3 inches of bullet placement can make the difference between, shooting a kidnapper and shooting a hostage. And so if you just kind of think about that and prep your shooting in that way, you'll probably be capable of doing everything you need to do in the match without a whole lot of difficulty. I would say the biggest thing you can do to prep if you're planning on going to Gamut is start rucking. And because it sucks you. It is, I think Nick will agree, and I've done a lot of run and guns. I've done a lot of long endurance. I'm an ice climber and a mountaineer. I've climbed 20,000 foot peaks in the Andes, and I was more broken after Gamut than pretty much anything I've ever done. My quads, my eccentric muscles in my quads did not function. I could not stand up or sit down in a chair for about 4 days after Gamut unless I had something that I could, press myself up and then like grab the towel bar off the toilet if I had to take a dump, and grab the towel bar to pull myself up standing or sit down. I was literally, my legs were shot. And that has never happened to me in my life. I've done 20-mile days on the trail, just on my own trail running. And this was so next level in terms of physical difficulty. So prep for rucking, and that'll serve you the best.
Within that, I think we can kind of discuss a little bit about our performance and maybe things we did immediately after the match, because again, a 2-day match is a whole inclusive event, and we had very limited but valuable time to kind of contend with between those 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll kind of talk a bit about that, and then we can add on for you afterwards. Going into day one, my goal was rucking wise. Not knowing what to expect, but my goal was moving average of like weight wise, whatever. Looking at my training, I was thinking, hey, I want to maintain a sub 17-minute average moving pace. Didn't succeed in that. I got like a 7. I held back a little bit because with my experience specifically for run and gun style events, I've always had a problem with my pregame hydration, my day of hydration, and like nutrition and stuff like that. In this case for Gamut, I got it down pat. I didn't have any cramps. I felt confident with my movements. My pacing was actually like 45 seconds faster on the second day compared to the first day. And on the first day, there was slightly less weighted movement. So, and performance perspective for me, that was a good thing going forward. But after our first day, we had, I think, 14 and a half miles per my Garmin was the actual, like 14.5 for the first day. And afterwards, like John mentioned, both of us, it took like a hard 45 seconds to just physically get into our car of sitting down. Like afterwards, I was done. I was mentally gone to the point that I finished. It took me like 30 minutes to get all my gear together. I remember immediately after I got fixated on my last pistol shot felt like a squib. It sounded funny. So not being totally there, I went over to one of the staff members saying, hey man, I need to check my gun. I think it's a squib. And, to the point there wasn't, but it was just the point that that final push was just so rough, was just so much heart into it that it came to that point. But afterwards, John and I agreed, hey man, we need to do deep tissue massage here. This is going to be a rough second day. So we went ahead, got a couple things, got some food in our systems between John and I and another one of our friends that came along as well, and refueled a bit there. got some stuff for the morning after, arranged for deep tissue massage late, got that done. And I'm telling you, that did wonders for us on top of our good post-match stretching, Theragun work, which John, thank you for bringing that. That was fantastic. And then the second day going on, my pace was like 45 seconds faster. And I owe that to one, kind of pace myself, setting expectations the first day, and then the second day being wrecked. But again, with the hydration, nutrition being on point from the first day, the current match of the first day, and then the time between the first and second day, it was on point. I was satisfied with it, and I'm ultimately pretty happy with my performance considering all the different variables that were in play for Gamut.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an interesting topic, and maybe we'll do a show on that or something. It's with the kind of personalities that shoot a lot of these matches, there's very much the attitude a lot of times of like, I'm just going to push through no matter what. Hell or high water, we're going to do anything. And like that, I'll call it self-care, that maintenance, like whatever, like preparing, trying to eat well, hydrate, all that before a match. You know, like you're saying, set expectations, but set your, what pace you need that you can keep performing at that. And then whether it's deep tissue massage, a therapy gun, foam rolling, like, that's all great. I mean, that's really helping that we got to take care of our bodies. We go and we beat ourselves up at these matches. Probably, yeah, way, like, yeah, and way harder. I mean,
because I love my man.
I go to a chiropractor, and like I was in there. She had someone she was training. I do some of these events with her husband, and she made the comment like, well, he's young and healthy, but he's a lot worse than maybe a lot of guys his age, because the events they do are kind of hard on their, they're kind of high mileage, hard on their body. And I'd never really thought about it like that. But from a medical perspective, we probably are harder on our bodies than a lot of people. So anything that you can find that you can do to better treat your body in the middle of a match, between, after, before, after, like, absolutely do it.
Yeah. Like I've booked massages after 10-day back-to-back climbing trips when I get home. This is the first time after a single day I was like, we need massages. And luckily I was able to convince Nick. We found a shop that was open. We drove like 20 minutes up. And one thing I will mention that Nick, I think forgot or whatever, is that when we left the match the first day, I was driving, and about 5 minutes after we left, I'm driving and like the world is just spinning, and I'm very, very sober at this point. I was like, holy shit, Nick, I don't think I can drive, man. Are you okay to take over? And luckily he was. And I was just like, I had great nutrition. I was eating goo packs. I was eating, honey stinger waffles, good on hydration. And my body was just like, I went into this going down with the goal to win. That was like my own personal goal. I did not achieve that goal. I did pretty well. Top 5 finish, but like I left nothing on the table, and I could have left stuff on the table and I wouldn't have been nearly as shattered coming back from it. But I mean, I just put everything. I was at 100% output the entire day, trying my hardest to be not waste a second and move as fast as I could. And I felt like it. I paid, my body could tell that I pushed that hard. And I had to have Nick drive after that first, until we got dinner in us, that first day. And I ate an entire 18-inch pizza, a set of wings, and something else. Like I ate 1,300, 1,500 calories in one meal, and I was still hungry, and then ate like more pizza than, I ate Nick's leftover pizza the next morning for breakfast. And I'm glad I did. Like I ate like a pig, and I ate like a pig for like 4 days after I came home. I was in such a calorie deficit.
Actually, a thing that we didn't bring up, and I'd like to bring up now, is we talked about it before and after here. Let's talk about a current, what we did during the match, because this was like an 8-hour per day thing, and that's just not a vacuum where you're not drinking or you're not eating or something. So we can talk a bit about that if you don't mind.
Yeah.
On my end, me and John did our typical, like, hey, we're in a new area. Let's go ahead and forage for our food at the local Walmart, Target, Publix. God bless Publix, right? For whatever, right? So we decided that we wanted something that was like, hey, we're going to be outside. It's going to be potentially hot. We need something that's going to sustain us a bit for this. That's not going to be like spoiled because we had it out in our packs or something all day. So we each brought our own goo packs for today. I definitely underestimated how many I would need if I was following the prescribed like 45-minute window that you would typically use goo packs in. So I brought less than I expected to use. I brought what I expected to use, but ended up needing more. But it ended up being just okay. And then we ended up getting like peanut butter sandwiches, and we packed like a couple in our packs.
We made peanut butter sandwiches on raisin bread, and they were a godsend. Just
yeah. I felt like David Hasselhoff, like when he's drunkenly eating that burger. Like I get back from a movement, and
yeah,
I just like saw that peanut butter sandwich. I tore it open and just like disgustingly stuffed my mouth with. It was the best sandwich I've ever had, and that's coming from like a Florida person that loves pub subs, whatever. But that sandwich was chef's kiss, dude. It was fantastic. So I think our food choices were pretty good, all things considered, and I was pretty satisfied with how much I ate, what I brought with me, and overall, again, I was pretty satisfied with the performance for the match, especially the nutrition before, during, and after.
Yeah, I think that the big takeaway there is that run and guns, even the long ones, even like the 10Ks or even some of the 15Ks down in Oklahoma, which Nick and I have both done. Even the 15K, you're only on the course for about 3.5 hours, 3 hours 45 minutes, assuming you're not being dumb and running a weighted division, which we've also been dumb and done. But this is almost 8 hours of like nonstop high intensity movement, and it's a totally different game than a 5K or a 10K running gun where you're on the fast runners. The fastest guys at like the Heartbreak were off the course in like an hour 10 or something, and that was like 8.5 miles.
Hour 58. The fastest ones this year came in just under 2.
Just under 2. And for the 5Ks, those guys who are running at that pace are done in like 45 minutes, 48 minutes. So that's really a sprint. This was really a grind. And so you definitely got to think about your nutrition. I normally don't do anything with like electrolyte replacement in my drinks or anything. I prefer to just drink straight water. But this match I actually did just because I knew I don't like it. It kind of upsets my stomach, but I knew it was going to be more important than it was going to be critical to have it, because without it, I'd be in deep trouble. And I'm glad I did.
Awesome. So let me see where we're at here, because we're at an hour and just over an hour. So let's go into like what did you learn? Are there takeaways, any goals or anything like that? Maybe that if you're planning on doing another one of these that you're going to do different.
I didn't love either pack choice I had. I think I could do better. It would be pretty silly to like go out and buy a special pack just for Gamut. But I think there are better packs out there. But I'm not quite sure which one, because the best way to carry that weight is a weight plate. It's, super low profile, tight to your back. It's easy to jog with compared to like a big heavy pack filled with lower density, higher volume stuff compared to a steel plate. But I think you could optimize for that. I'd bring the exact same rifle, but I'd put an LPVO on like I discussed. I was good with footwear, good with nutrition, good with ammo. I just shot basic 55 grain ball, nothing special. Don't need to, spend the extra money on any sort of like fancy match ammo at all for this. The difference between that and shooting like 77 SMKs, I wouldn't have had literally a single shot difference, because again, the ranges are small, and even, at that range, 3 inches, a 3-inch target is still plenty. We can talk a bit about the shooting if we want, if we have time at the end. I think I would probably, here's one thing I did do. I brought trekking poles. I was the only guy there with trekking poles, and I got a bunch of like laughs and funny looks at the beginning of the day. Like, why you have hiking sticks? And you know what? I swear to God, by the end of the day on day 2, when I was passing dudes left and right and center, they're like, I need to get some hiking sticks. For that kind of mileage, for that kind of weight, it makes sense. And I'm a big fan. Now, I thought about them for Heartbreak because I went with heavy division this year too. And ultimately with Heartbreak, because there's so much like scrub and crap you got to fight your way through in the obstacle course, and all your gear has to go through the obstacle course, I wouldn't bring it. But for Gamut, I'm glad I had him, and I'd absolutely bring him again.
Training wise, would you do anything different training wise leading up to it?
I would actually train, maybe. I didn't.
That's I know I mean you say that you do a lot of you're very physically fit, do a lot of this kind of stuff regularly. So I would venture to say your fitness level is probably more than the average guy out there.
I do have a pretty good baseline. I've been, hiking under heavy packs consistently and frequently for 20 plus years because of, rock climbing, ice climbing, etc. So I do have that going for me. I did not do any specific training for Gamut. I had some like bad hip issues, like leading up, like for all of January, I was like, laid up. I could barely do anything. So I really had like no training at all other than some dry fire leading up to it. I'm glad I did the dry fire. The dry fire paid off, especially for like some of the strong hand, weak hand stuff that's there. But I would have preferred to have not be injured and have a little bit of time to train, do some heavy rucks, and get a little more live fire in. Where I live, we're completely snowed under right now. There's 3 feet of snow on the ground. In fact, it's snowing right now. Actually, we're getting about another 6 inches tonight. So there's, the live fire opportunities were few and far between for me. I got to drive quite a ways to get to a good range that isn't, buried under 3 feet of snow. But yeah, aside from that, I would have prepared like I normally would have, absent injuries and weather conditions.
Fair enough. Nick, how about you? Same thing.
To a change for preparation wise, I was pretty satisfied. Again, my training is pretty good. Maybe a slight adjustment with maybe readjusting a little bit more to doing like a longer zone 2 kind of thing. I've been kind of slacking on that just because life and maybe other fitness goals I have at this time. But otherwise, I was pretty satisfied. I would again bring with what I have currently right now. I bring the same exact thing over again. Pretty satisfied gear wise. I might have brought a shorter gun, but next time I go, I might go full meme and say, hey, let me bring an M203. Let me bring a 308. My body's gonna hate me for it, but it's certainly a thing I wouldn't say no to, and it's certainly an experience I wouldn't want to deny myself, despite what it may bring to me. So otherwise, for this going to next to reach that optimal performance, I'm pretty satisfied. Like pack wise, gear wise, pretty happy with what I can control directly. I'm pretty pleased with what I did. So I'd probably do it again.
And I don't know if they had any VTACs, but that M203 is definitely like the best VTAC, barricade stop.
Dude,
so you got that.
People talk about that. It is a fantastic muzzle brake, weight up forward. You can do like 0.08 splits all day with it and crush a B8. It's great. But again, you're adding like a whole pound to your gun, and for events like this, it's probably honestly, dude. I know I just said that last time, but thinking about that sand and thinking about how I felt the day after, no, I'm good. I'll bring what I brought before.
I'm going to hold you. I would not bring a 308 to this. The a short, lightweight 223 is for sure.
Bring a P90.
The optimal.
Stargate status. Bring a P90.
Yeah.
The range is good. The capacity is good. The weight is good. Bring a P90. I'm going to get some flack for saying that. And God, if Bob Keller sees me saying this, I suspect that he would be very displeased with what I just said. But it's out there now.
Yeah. And I'll throw out one tip for anyone else considering going to Gamut. One of the things that Nick and I did is try to gather a lot of intel looking at old videos of Bob, interviews and podcasts he's been on, and his sort of training methodology in his classes, some of his YouTube media. And you know what? A lot of the things that we expected to see shooting wise were in there. So I'll say that if you put in the time and kind of, dig for some intel based on the media Bob's got online, you will actually give yourself sort of a leg up, or at least have a good idea what to expect. So that's what we did, and it paid off.
All right. So you talked about, you wanted to talk about the shooting. Is there anything else you want to add to that about the shooting?
I'm not going to talk too much about the stages, but in terms of like some things that were interesting, right? Different than other running guns, where some of the stages were completely back to back to back. So when you have to carry, when I say you got to carry 4 mags, like you better have your 4 mags ready to go, because you're just going from stage to stage to stage to stage. There was nothing USPSA style in terms of like big memory stages or anything like that. The shooting itself was pretty straightforward. You had things where, you know, you'd be shooting from some sort of awkward position and you didn't have a lot of time to get into position. There was obviously the shooting stage where you shot from the car. There was a stage where you had to drag a really heavy sled in the dirt and then do some strong hand, weak hand shooting. That was a challenge, and that one ate a lot of people's lunches. I'm told, I think the RO told me that only about 10 or so people managed to shoot that stage without timing out and eating big penalties. And so it was interesting. I think the back-to-back-to-back stages kind of thing, that's something that we don't typically encounter in run and gun. Normally we've got time to like restuff mags or shift gear around, or like, you know, if you got mud on your optic, you had time to clear it off running from one stage to the next. But you didn't have any of that opportunity here. So you really had to be like on your game for multiple stages back to back and then go for a very, very long ruck to think about all the things you did wrong. And then the other thing is, of course, there's many of the stages had, you know, difficult physical elements integrated into them along, you know, that were also done on those short part times. So I don't think training in that way is actually beneficial. I don't think it actually makes you a better shooter. I think you're better off training shooting and training strength, you know, whatever that case may be. And then you can put a little bit of time shooting, you know, with an elevated heart rate, or like, you know, trying to do like sandbag get-ups and then shooting. But I think it's important to train them distinctly, but just simply be aware that they're coming and know how you need to perform. Just don't fool yourself into thinking that going to the range, doing a bunch of burpees and then shooting is actually training. I don't think that's training at all. I don't think you're actually going to make measurable improvements.
100% agree with that. Whenever I do like a run and a shoot thing, I never get a good run nor shooting training. I separate and segregate those into separate things, because just generally how run and gun and other events like that are. And back to back stages, I don't think doing a run and shoot kind of training, or doing like, say, doing some kettlebell stuff and then shoot immediately is not going to really be a great way to address that. So that's a whole different thing that I wouldn't want to get to at this point. But yeah, I would 100% concur with John that.
It's just your fundamentals falling apart. It's just your fundamentals falling apart, and the better your fundamentals, the better they hold up and they don't fall apart. So yeah, I agree 100%. I see guys do that training online, and I agree. Train your fitness. Yeah, train your fitness, train your shooting. When your shooting starts to fall apart, it's, you know, it's falling from here to there instead of falling here to, you know, off the screen. I mean, that's really what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
All right, so I guess we can start wrapping this up. Is there start with John? Is there anything else you want to add about this before we kind of wrap this show up?
I thought it was a really cool match. It was certainly different than what I'm done. I'm super glad I did it. And I'd probably consider going back again. I don't know that I'll make it back in November. I got some other things on my plate this year, but I'm certainly glad I went. It was very interesting. It was really cool to be part of the inaugural run. And I'm also super impressed with what Bob pulled off, not having a competition background, because, you know, these things aren't easy. There's a lot of factors to consider. And he did a really good job considering them. I actually like the scoring system in terms of the penalties, where I think we're just right where they need to be. You know, severe enough, but not so severe, because we've been to plenty of matches where the penalties are not severe, and it actually makes it easy to game. There really was no way to game this. So you know, my TLDR is that it was a really cool event. I'm glad I went. I wanted to do longer, more endurance-oriented running guns. Like, it'd be cool to do like a 20 or 25-mile running gun, but that's, you know, really hard for the land requirement. And Bob found a way to pull it off, given the very limited space he had with some good relationships with his neighbors. So overall, 2 thumbs up. Psyched I went. And for anyone viewing this, I recommend you go too.
And just to clarify, I think you got 4th, right? You were in 4th.
I got 5th. I would have had 4th, but one of the match items fell out of my pocket somewhere along the way, and the time penalty I ate pushed me out of 4th. So, but it doesn't matter. Them's the breaks. I wound up placing 5th. Yep.
Yeah, still a great finish. And then Nick, you got to wrap up here.
Yeah, of course. First, thanks for having us on board, Ryan. It's always a pleasure to hang out and talk a bit at length with you. I know life happens, and we don't often get to talk and hang out at this rate outside of Run and Gun whenever we see each other. So again, I'm very excited to hang out with you, be here, and see you at Wolverine here very soon. It's a Gamut challenge. I'm very impressed with the event that Bob put out. Very satisfied with the conduct of the match. The staff there, generally pretty good. I was glad with the conduct of the match, and they volunteered a lot of their time. So to the staff that volunteered and made the time and made the effort to make it happen, massive kudos to them. I'd like to give a big thanks to Privateer Group on Instagram. He's been a big factor in helping me and other friends make some of these events happen for us. Because we alluded to it. This stuff isn't cheap, and it's a big time suck in that end too. So not a lot of folks are afforded the opportunity to do these kind of things as often as we do them. So I'm very appreciative of the support and the folks I've met that have helped me make these things possible. So again, I'm very glad to have met some folks that make these happen. So big shout out to Privateer Group on Instagram. Good guy. He's doing a lot to help the community, especially outside of shooting and personal improvement. And otherwise, I'm glad to have been part of this event. And like I mentioned, with so many expenses pretty heavy for these, and if you have a very limited amount of time and capital to make matches, if you're in the Southeast, man, I would say that this is definitely a match for you to look at more seriously, because it is a great match. It's unique, and I think the Gamut Challenge experience that we had was certainly unique to everything else. So if you're in the Southeast, I would definitely recommend that, hey man, this is probably a good bang for your buck. Like if you had a certain amount of events to do per year, this might be one you might want to look at with a particularly close eye. So I hope to make it to January. November, life happens, can't make it, but January looks like it may be possible for me to make a return there. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's awesome. And I think this is a good, there's a lot of these new matches coming out, and it's like you've never heard of it and you see about it. Like give them a try. The worst that could happen is it's not a well-run match. I think it's awesome that this one is. I mean, even just from running local matches, it is really hard to nail a good stage with good time penalties. And I mean, and that's just on the stage. That's not like a whole big match with all the moving parts that something like that has. So, I mean, it's awesome. It's awesome that it's different. I mean, I think these guys here, I know personally, besides Run and Gun, I've shot 3-gun. I've shot like the Rock Hard, which is like a hard as hell. These bigger. You're kind of making me think of that when you're talking about these stage to stage. Because in Rock Hard, you would have 5-minute par times on stages, and for the most part, half the shooters are parring out on that, and the ones who do finish the whole stage are finishing up in like 4 minutes and 30 seconds. They're just these big long stages, but these kind of different matches are fun. They get you Wolverines like that. It's not a Run and Gun. It's not a USPSA match. It's not a 3-gun match. It's just, it kind of exists in its own little thing, and it's got its own scoring and its own unique flavor. And it just makes things interesting. I mean, as much as I love a traditional Run and Gun or even a traditional 3-gun match, just getting out of your element and doing something like this that you have no clue. I mean, we shot Wolverine last year, no clue what was going on. And it was a cool experience. We got a little bit of an idea this year, and we're trying to kind of fill these guys in on what we learned, and it may be totally different. I mean, a lot of these guys that run these matches like this, they don't want you gaming it. They want you to come out, and they want the best person that can shoot and adapt and has that that baseline fitness, and it's neat to have that. So it's cool to hear that worked out. And I don't know, if that'll make my match schedule like these guys are talking. I'm pretty limited on what I do. Most of mine are, if I can get it in a 6-hour drive, I maybe can fit it in the schedule. But it's cool. It's cool. It's out there. So
you're married with kids, and Nick and I are single with no kids, so we got a little more flexibility. I suspect over time things will change, and we'll be as limited as you are on availability, resources, and everything else.
Yeah, it's all balanced. Yeah, there's guys that shoot we got maybe have wife and kids shoot twice as many matches as you guys even do. I mean, it's all kind of your priorities in life, and that's awesome. I mean, I love every match that I can get out to, and then I get a little bit of that FOMO when I can't make it, but that's all right. So thanks again for being on. I really appreciate it, you guys, and I hope we see all you guys out at a match. Come on out. Feel free to hit me up if you guys have any questions for these for John or Nick. Feel free to email the show or find me on social media and whatever, Facebook, YouTube, anything, and I'll try to get you some answers and pass it along or whatever. So, all right, thanks. Have a good night.
And you can hit me up
Thanks,
on Instagram on Let's Run and Gun. And Nick, if you want to plug yours as well.
Sure. I'm SoFla Nick on Instagram. So mostly post shooting content, whatever on there. So yeah, happy to connect with you guys out there. Thanks, Ryan. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ryan.
No problem.
Have a good one.